Part of your critical review will be examining the relationship between the literature's consensus and evidence. And this is really why we do a critical review at all. From our literature review or deep dive, we got an idea of the consensus, what people agree on, what they disagree on, and sort of the main points of the topic. The critical review allows us to evaluate the strength of the evidence across those sources. And there's sort of 4 possible scenarios. So the first is that there is weak or no consensus and there is weak evidence. This means that the literature is kind of all over the place in their findings. There's not really consistent conclusions, and researchers and teachers disagree on what methods are best. Paired with weak evidence, this practice should be treated cautiously. Without agreement in the literature, educators should be hesitant to implement the strategy broadly, especially if the supporting evidence is also weak. If there's a weak consensus but strong evidence, the practice might be promising, but the field may still need more synthesis, replication, or theoretical agreement to truly claim that the practice is effective and that it should be implemented. For example, if all elementary school teachers agree that giving kids homework is bad, but only 1 or 2 studies find that to be true, then we need to test that across different contexts and populations. And a lot of that has to do with external validity. If there's that same weak consensus, but there's really strong evidence, the practice might be promising, but the field still needs more synthesis, replication, or theoretical agreement. So if there's 2 or 3 studies that find that a certain teaching method is effective, but a lot of instructors still disagree because of poorly run previous studies or past biases, then you need to replicate this study across different contexts and populations. In the case of a strong consensus in the literature, but weak evidence, this practice should not be treated as settled. Instead, it represents a valuable research opportunity because the field has identified an important idea that still needs stronger empirical testing. And this is one of the most common situations in education, including higher education. Educators might implement a teaching method simply because it's what other universities are doing, or it's just what they were taught to do, but they're not really sure why. Or they feel like it works, but there's not really any evidence to prove that it does. This is a huge opportunity for researchers because if they find that the method does work, then it adds a layer of credibility to that teaching method so educators can confidently implement it. However, if studies find the opposite to be true, then that's also really valuable because then we can start correcting the method and implementing teaching practices that are effective. With a strong consensus and strong supporting evidence, this practice is more defensible for implementation. In these cases, the main task is not to prove the effect again, but to understand when, where, and for whom the practice works best. So again, in the case of strong evidence, regardless of the consensus, it's helpful to test across multiple disciplines and institutions. But if we know something works and everyone agrees that it works, the main place a researcher could add value would depend on those literature gaps that we talked about in the literature review videos. Things like the black box effect, like we've proven that this works, but we're not really sure how, or the measurement gap. Maybe a certain teaching method improves test scores, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's improving a student's understanding of the concept. In your write-up, you'll discuss where your topic lays in this table and the implications of that combination. And again, this will help you determine how and where your study adds value to the current literature available, both from an evidence standpoint and contributing to the overall consensus.